have a few more people joining us, but we're going to start recording, and thank you, Heather, for that. I will introduce Ranti Junus. Is that how you pronounce it, Junus?
It's an old spelling, actually. It's called Junus.
Yunus.
Uh-huh.
Okay, all right. Well, I would like to thank Ranti for helping out with us today with our link resolver talk. Ranti works at Michigan State University. She's a systems librarian for eResources, and her responsibilities include supporting technical and access issues related to electronic resources and services. She supports the design and access organization of electronic library materials, including purchase databases, the online catalog, and other digital resources. She assists with the workflow designs for the library's electronic resources, and she identifies policy, technical, and programmatic, needs of electronic resource preservation. Just a brief description of what a link resolver is, which is what we're going to be talking about today. It is a resolution server that translates an open URL to the appropriate linking syntax according to the target database, which then takes users to the intended article. An open URL concept and its implementation for eResources has been around for almost 2 decades. And today, Ranti is going to share with us her experience with 2 link resolvers that they use at Michigan State, and some of her daily routines in working and supporting the users who access the resources. Everyone else is welcome to jump in at any time. If you have questions, you can unmute and ask, or put the question in a chat or comments. We appreciate any kind of feedback. We will go ahead and get started. And again, thank you, Ranti Junus.
Thank you, Leanne. Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us on, I think, the last program for the year for our MiALA Electronic Resource Group. And I got the honor to be the closing presenters for this program. And thank you for arranging this for the whole year. It's very useful for me as well. Thank you. Let's see. So probably you know me, I don't really have to introduce myself too, but on your slide, you can see my email address and my Twitter account. I respond quicker via Twitter, so if you want to ask questions, just ping me there. Because email typically have a lot of still unread emails that have to flow through. Okay. All right, so I feel like just put it some history. I think a lot of you can find this information so easily, but I would like to point out that it's actually this link resolver openURL and link resolver is actually designed by a couple of librarians. And so it's not actually actual product from a vendor. So Herbert Van Sompel and Patrick Hoxtenbach, they thinking that probably there is some kind of problem, which is user cannot get to the article they need easily, because if they look at such an abstract and indexer, and then they find information, they have to go to specific database and redo the search again. So the idea of one URL is basically, could we basically automate that suite from the request to the target article, and they don't have to do the search again manually. And I actually just find out that SFX stands for special effects, and it's actually something new to me. And then they designed it around late 2000, early 2000, and then SFX software is acquired by Ex Libris, and then Ex Libris can develop that further and then market that as an SFX that we know now. So it's very fascinating stories about this history about this. So, so if you want to make it more simple, again, but the definition of link resolver is actually, it's just a software actually, and it's translate an incoming URL and then change that into appropriate URL that we work with the target database. It's basically, that's what link resolver is. And the journey or the user experience typically define go to database, find a citation, and then they see the get it button. Click that, and that behind the scene where the things is working. So the system that has to get it button send information to link resolver, and then link resolver will check the knowledge base that what we tell them what information we have. And then if they see that we do have access to that particular article, then they create a proper URL and then send it to the target database. And then if you don't have, and usually we then set it up also where we want that information landed, right? So typically we have the landing page. So, well, unfortunately we don't have access, but here's the button to interlibrary loan that you can use. Or any other options, say, well, we might have the print version of this particular journal, check our catalog and then give them the link. Or we also have some kind of information, well, fill out this form and then we can do the work for you to find the article that you need. So it's variety of tools or resources that the library can design based on this particular user flow. So this is a typical, it's not very typical, but openURL does not always have coming from a database. Like, so you can construct openURL yourself by, so to speak, using the Crossref or the DOI information. So you type in this information and the DOI themselves, then translate that into this particular journal's target. Or if you use, the currently we use is the 360 link, you can create that. This is an example from a PubMed, and then they get information from PubMed. PubMed just give them the PMID number, and then this our 360 link resolver will translate that into this JAMA network article on the file. So it's everything's behind the scenes. So you cannot see, we cannot see what's going on behind the scene. We only see, we click the button, we see the end result, whether we get access or we don't get access. Any questions so far? All right. And this is a typical openURL that actually you get to see behind the scene, because this is based on the standard that developed to accommodate open requests. So they make this, actually the only difference is you can see the first probably link is the one is started with WebBridge, one is started with Z resolution stuff. So that's the differences between this is just the base URL. Everything else should stay very similar according to the standard from that being developed for openURL. So it contains the format, it contains the article title, journal title, SSN or ISBN if needed, the holding information, the volume, page number, the author, the article, and everything else that's needed in order to get information. Ideally, the more information you put, the narrower the results, because the ideal situation, you get the exact article. Although sometimes, probably depending on target database, you cannot do that. So you want to move back. Well, if you cannot get just the article, maybe you at least landed in a particular issue, or maybe you at least landed a particular journal. So then the system can be designed to move back depending on how the capability of the target database or the target publishers can accommodate openURL requests. And typically, I think the open access journals that being hosted and platform independent platform publishers typically do not have capability to accept openURL. That is when basically openURL just send them to the journal landing page, and then eventually people just have to browse or search again. So that's the kind of fallback that openURL can allow us to work on. So this is an example. This is from EBSCO. I did the search on this particular and got this particular title, and you can see there's a fine text MSU over there. So that's actually indicated that this is only an abstract, and you can find the full text using this button. So when you click the Find Text MSU, when our user click that, and this is the linking that WebSco sent to our link resolver. I don't know if you can see my mouse over here. So then started at EBSCO in the middle, little bit in the middle here, and you can see the serial solutions linking. It is because we tell when we set up EBSCO, and EBSCO has an option what link resolver you use, we use this particular serial solutions. And then EBSCO behind the scene, the system and software, create that information and then embed all this necessary information, citation, and send it to the serial solutions. And then this is what come up, or this is our landing page on serial solutions where they receive it and they check the knowledge base. And then serial solution, okay, these are the information and you do have access to this particular Terrell and Francis database. So here is the information that we're going to send to Taylor Francis, which is include the DOI, the article, the genre, the title, information, and including where this is coming from. And then they put it's called library information science technology. And for troubleshooting purposes, this SID information, it's actually very useful, at least for me, because then when user report that, I click the link, but I cannot get the article. And then if you get this referral URL, then I can start investigating EBSCO database, try to follow their steps, and then figure out what went wrong from that angle. So it's also useful for the statistic purposes. Although actually, I never look at that statistic. It's just basically can tell people where the people typically coming from for this particular database. That's the idea. So after serial solution send at openURL, and then you can see it is landed nicely, very nicely into Taylor and Francis, and this is the end result, end URL linking from Taylor and Francis. So you can see the progression from EBSCO has a lot of gobbledygook stuff, openURL, in a serial solution format that's an openURL, and then when Taylor and Francis received that request, their own system working on that, translate all the citation information, everything into their database, and then send the final URL to the users. Any question in this one? I feel like this is actually pretty straightforward. I think a lot of you who deal with this should probably already know, and this is not something new. Another one, actually some example that we get from, because we also open up our holding information to Google Scholars. So then when people using Google Scholars, they find searching for some information, and then they kind of like, if they set it up and they can see this MSU text access, that is our get it button. And then when people, then this is the linking that Google Scholar created and then send it to our 360 link. And then this is the results for coming from Google Scholar search. So that's basically a very simplified idea of how connection. So when we talk about link resolver, literally it's just a software. So I have no idea what's behind the scenes, because serial solution create their own, EBSCO create their own, OCLC create their own, SFX has their own. So each particular software is probably not necessarily open for us, but then that's how it's just basically translating in, there's an input, translation and transaction, and then an output. That's very basic idea. And then there's actually a couple other group of people who try to create their own link resolver. And then the most probably heard is the called umlaut. And then it is actually developed by John Hopkins University libraries and behave just the same thing. And it's just input, output, input, process, and output. And these are umlaut, keystone, and Godot. It's actually not always no longer being used because probably the maintenance, because it's open source, and then the maintenance is actually maybe become too burdensome for the person who developed that. And also probably the person, at least the umlaut creators no longer work with John Hopkins. And then somebody else probably from John Hopkins still maintain that. And then NYU get it, and OC1 button is actually the one that created by that particular groups. And then there's also tools that actually utilize the openURL link resolver to achieve the same thing. With libkinomet from the third iron, Lean library from the Sage, and the Copernio. So the basic idea is all of this, the idea is helping users to get seamless access to the target article. So at MSU, we used to have a web bridge because of we are innovative interface shops. And then so by default, just having web bridge as part of the linking resolver makes sense. It's managed by one company, so we don't have to deal with several companies. And then we just work on it. And then keep in mind what we have is an older version. It's not WebBridge LR, but it's LR, but this is actually in the first kind of version, and it's actually installed in our catalog system. So it's actually literally self-hosted it. And then in 2014 or 15, I believe, and then we purchased Summons, and then the decision was just let's also go ahead with 360 links because it's coming from the same company. 360 links will read our knowledge base and zero solutions on the fly, and we don't have to upload our information manually from the catalog, and then just go ahead with that. And since I actually the one who's probably practically exclusively working in both angle of this, and what there is a pros and cons that I like, right? So WebBridge install library catalog means at least the library has a control over it. And then while 360 link, it's actually probably easier and faster because we don't have to deal with it, but it's kind of black box to me because I don't really understand what's going on behind the scene. So all the communication of troubleshooting, everything else, have to communicate that to serial solutions. And depending on their schedule or their priorities and everything, they might or might not resolve the problem right away. On the other hand, WebBridge, while they have to be maintained manually, it's actually allows me to fix the problem right away because then I can construct the incorrect openURL to the correct one and then just redo that right away. So say it takes probably 2 weeks for 360 link to finally working on my case, I can probably fix the problem if I use WebBridge. It's just within 2 days. So it's just the pros and cons. Both working just fine and everything else. And I also would like to point out to 360 link is they cannot, because they rely on what's the term for that? The basic structure that should work on every kind of the target database. With the web bridge, actually, I can say, well, if the target is ProQuest, but it comes from the PubMed, this is the condition that I probably should make sure that ProQuest will always get it correct. But if it's coming, say, from EBSCO, then this is the linking structure that I can send to ProQuest to make sure that it's always correct. While on 360 links, probably not always the case because to them it's just one particular linking syntax for the whole database. And I can create, on the web bridge, I can create 2 kind of linking syntax that point to the ProQuest, but with subtle differences that will solve the problem quickly. So if you're interested, I can show you. We still have that installed. It's not being used, but it's still running in a way. And then this is, you can see our WebBridge user interface is a very, I don't know what to call it, Spartan, very simple. And then, but then we literally have to set up everything that listed in this particular option. So we have to create the categories. We have to decide. We have to set up what are the origin database, what the target database, and then fields to be used for constructing the open URL, and etc. etc. Somebody have the phone call? And then, like I said, it's really takes a lot of time to maintain. So you have to say this is the category. If it's biographical, is it a book? Is it coming from a chat? Is actually have to check the library catalog, whether it's actually you see distance users. This is actually for our interlibrary loan. So basically, if it's coming from interlibrary loan with this particular pattern, and this is actually the URL that we have to send to our Iliad and stuff like that. And then the origins actually the database that we subscribe to that will provide the open URL options or the find text at MSU option to our users. So we have to define them that this is coming from. And then for the target database, this is also the one we have to create. So like the first two, after migrate to Sierra. So like the faculty request of book delivery is the one we set up for interlibrary loan. And then we fill out if we have full text available, and it's basically the landing page that if you want to actually set up specific information, additional information of the article you request, and then we wrap it up and also send it to our interlibrary loan. So, but yeah, so it is very time consuming. And so, and since especially MSU subscribe to so many databases, we basically have to make sure that we have all these target resources listed in our WebBridge. So in terms of timing, yes, moving to serial solution is way make my life simpler in terms of managing the content. And then, so these are the options. So on the bottom, you see the resolution server linking. So this is, I have to create every single one of this linking for every target database. So imagine I have to create probably right by now about 400 linking, literally almost similar to everyone for every single one. So, and then I also can say that always have to match the date, have to match the ISSN in order to make sure that we do have access, it matches correctly with our knowledge base. So I have any questions so far?
I have a question. This is Leanne. How long did you originally set up WebBridge?
Yes.
And how long did that take you? And then how long did it take you to switch over? And how difficult was that process?
I no longer remember. I might unconsciously block that memory, how long it take to set up the WebBridge. It does a lot of trial and error, because then I have to understand, go to every target database, do some search, and look at that, how the end result of probably the stable URL, or how they end up, the end result of the article, and try to mimic that from the database. So when I search the article on target database and see the end URL, whether they contain a DOI or they contain a volume number, page number, stuff like that. And that information then I use to construct the open URL. So if say JSTOR always require ISSN, journal title, and an article title, but not necessarily require the author, and I can just create that particular open URL to our the web page. And when we switch to summon thankfully, I'm not the only one. I'm not the only one who has to work on this by myself. So we actually create a task force group to figure out. It's actually more about the user interface that we set it up, because the linking, the switching itself is actually pretty straightforward. We just tell eResources, well, since we already use eResources to track our journals, they just turn it on and be done with it. The one that takes time is actually the user interface that users will see. What kind of the, let's see if I can show you again. The right side here, the column on the right side, that's actually takes more time to say what wording should we use, what kind of linking we should take users to. So on the middle section, this additional options, that's the setting that we have to work on at Zero Solutions. We have to check the library catalog and then search by title, search by SSN, because we want to make sure that people use that in case we have a print version of it. And then if the link doesn't work, and then contact us for help. And then this is actually the one used the most by users when they fail to get the articles. And this is also the one that helped me to do troubleshooting, because people click that link for help, they got the form, and then behind the scene, we actually capture the referral URL, and it's include the SID information of where the information is coming from that I can then use to troubleshoot access. And then on the bottom, what other information we want to put on them, and we have to set up the email and export information, ask the librarian. So this is more about the design that takes more time. The switch itself is painless, basically. Does that answer your question?
Yeah, yes, thank you. That's helpful.
Any other question? All right. So troubleshooting, I don't have answer, but I can share typically how I do that. It's typically the problem is literally metadata mismatch between the origin and target. That's most of the time. Sometimes it's also some changing that happen in the target database publishers, but it's very rarely because they are typically really good at that. So basically, when solutions or someone get their indexing directly from publishers, and then but we subscribe to an aggregator, right? Or we subscribe to a different targets. Say we don't necessarily subscribe to, I cannot think of out of my top of my head, but because we typically get package from ProQuest, but then probably the solution get information from, say, Web of Science. So there is a chance that Web of Science and ProQuest arrange their database, arrange their metadata differently, or have some kind of discrepancy for that. And typically also what the most error that also we get is when the aggregates get the metadata from a scan print version, where the publishers or resolution or summons got that information based on the digital publication. And its page number typically also one of the problem where it doesn't always match between the scan and the digital. And then sometimes also vendors change their linking structure, and then they thought their link resolver behind the scenes solved that. Is probably not resolvable. And then sometimes solution have then linking, openURL linking is just different than the target vendor. So this is one example. This just happened actually. Actually have a questions about why this happened. So people use Summon for the search. They got this information. They click the link, and then they send it. This is the information. They send it to openURL, JSTOR, and they have this particular information, right? They point to JSTOR. They include ISSN, the volume, the date, the page, the author last name. And then on JSTOR supposed to land it in that particular stable linking. But it doesn't work. And then so I kind of asked JSTOR, what happened? And apparently JSTOR, Codigi JSTOR, they don't need the author name information, because I guess, I don't know how they designed the author, and it's probably differently than summons. So typically it failed. So they said, if it fail, don't send the author information. So itself is already different. It makes me question, how come people not reporting? Basically, this is what happened. Why is JSTOR is already established, summon is already established, but it's only happened recently about this problem. So is this only this particular article, or is this actually the whole thinking linking to JSTOR probably doesn't work? Is this the black box behind the scene that I don't understand? Why after 6 years somebody finally point out that, hey, summon your openURL setting for JSTOR is incorrect. So this is what happens. I talked to JSTOR. This is what happened. I give them all the citation information, and JSTOR said, yeah, just remove the last name. And they said, it's just a linkary test. And I said, I don't have access to our linkary software. So is this something? Can you just tell Serious Solutions? Because like this is published between publishers. I should not be the one who tells Serious Solutions to fix the problem that will actually affect the whole linking to whole JSTOR database. Well, and JSTOR said, well, I don't know, we cannot help you because we only have to deal with ourselves. So then I create another ticket to Zero Solutions. So here, this is the problem. Can you look into that? And the answer is very simply. Looks like we need to update the linking syntax for this database. Just like that. After 6 years, they finally say, yeah, we should have to update the linking syntax. So for me, it's just like, why can all these publishers and all these vendors talk to each other? Why we, the library, always have to be the go-between in them? They have standards. They have Charleston Conference for sakes. So talk over there. And okay, pardon me for ranting, but this is now how we do troubleshooting. Communication, and communication between variety of publishers and providers and vendors. So it takes time, because then you have to figure out what went wrong, and then you have to explain that to either way. This is the context. This is the steps that user use. What exactly going on there, right? So that's basically happens. So that's why this multi-talk basically WebReach takes a lot of time, but it can fix quickly. While in Summons 360 link, I don't have to maintain, I don't have to update the content information, but it takes time as well. The time that I have to spend in order to understand what's wrong, it does not diminish. And in fact, it actually takes more time, because then have to communicate that to the vendor, wait until they solve the problem, and then communicate back to the user that, yes, your problem is resolved. So, so I apologize for those who thinking that I can provide you some kind of magic, I don't know, solution how to fix the problem, but it's not. The problem cannot be fixed until the vendor talk to each other and then totally work among themselves. So actually, I'm curious about other people's experience and thoughts about this. If there you have something else you want to add.
I'm curious, is anybody else using a different link resolver other than WebBridge and Serial Solutions? Or what is it, 360 link?
Yeah, 360.
Yeah. Oh, Alma. They have their own.
Oops. Somebody sent me private.
Yeah, that's me. I didn't want to interrupt everyone. Yeah, we're on Alma, and I'm not the link resolver person. I'm slowly learning, 5 years in. But she's been like, it is so not precise, and I used to be able to do this a lot more granularity and SFX. I never realized it was designed by librarians, so now everything makes sense. Much like Connection, but yeah, we're still figuring things out. And
Yeah, I heard about that too. It's actually, we are in the process of changing our library system. Our RFP just get approved by the purchasing, and then we'll send it up to the whichever companies. And I actually was curious about the changing too, because I heard Alma somehow people by default choose Alma, but then after that, all the information I heard from people have to work on implementing Alma and stuff. It seems like a nightmare to me. So I don't know.
I have heard at a conference that, and this was semi-jokingly, that Alma was better for librarians because it required so much technical knowledge because all the parts interact with all the other parts in ways you don't necessarily expect. There's also my personal beef with it where in cataloging anyways, it chooses which parts of the standards to obey. For example, one of the leader codes, just one code letter that designates games. They don't support that, but they support all the other bit codes for that particular field. And yeah, migrating your holdings, I don't understand, and I still don't understand. Sorry, Ex Libris. Why, when we have mark encoded data for all of our serials, that is not considered a migratable field? It turns it all into free text. So we're doing a lot of things by hand sewing, and thankfully we're smallish. Yeah.
Well, I think that's the point that I know XBs try to solve is basically they solve a bare bone and that's allow us to really customize that, but it's actually will require more time. The library should need to willing to probably put more money into hiring more people into making the Alma works really, really well. I think that's probably the part that most library don't think about. That's my personal take on it. But Deja, you have questions about MSU is using libkey in addition to Resolver. Yes, we do. We fall in love with this product mostly because we really like to browsing. And then we got it by default because we subscribe to browsing and we just get that. And our health science librarian appreciate it. They makes a lot of things probably easier and they are super responsive about that. Let me see if I can
Okay, because I'm partly asking, because I'll be honest, I've been name dropping you as like the person who turned me on to it, and we're talking with them about possibly doing a trial, but I'm kind of trying to wait to see what happens. Ex Libris is merging their discovery knowledge base with their holdings knowledge base, and in theory, that will make more sense. I've been waiting for this for years, but I don't know if that's going to improve linking or not. I'm hoping it will, but we also have the issue of making EBSCO content discoverable that we get from MAL. And Alma might work great for MSU because you guys are a lot larger. A lot of the stuff we have is, doing blending between branches and all sorts of extra bells and whistles we don't really use.
Yeah, well, LiveKey is actually relying on our openURL link software, but they have something else behind the scene that probably make it more granular and refine that linking. So, like I think you see it on your screen, just search PubMed, and then here they can user can basically download the PDF and a complete issue right away, or they can just go ahead and here and then search using this one and for our stuff. So it's just adding extra convenience to users and then not necessarily solve the problem. It's just something else to add. And I think, yes?
Oh, I was just going to add the other thing, because we did try what was known as direct linking our discovery layer, I think last summer. And I ended up having to turn it off, I think, within a few days, because people doing instruction would end up getting to a point where it would give you what I call the white screen of death, and you didn't know how to go back, even though I sent around some instructions. But again, I learned more about hands-on teaching.
Yeah.
So that's why I was kind of wondering how that worked from that particular layer. But looks like it still works really well for you guys.
It works well for us. Like if you go to the Wikipedia and then they have references, they read that, and this is an added bonus for us, because then literally we don't have set up openURL link resolver for Wikipedia, and this is when the libkey can play into the account, just helping out people to get the thing right away.
Yeah, it's just sort of a hard sell right now post-migration, because it's like, isn't that what Alma was supposed to make better? And it's like, kind of. But in our case, it was more to get the ERM part of the system, and we don't have that up and running. We're still coming out of getting all the things straightened out.
Yeah.
But okay, Ranti, I'm going to continue name dropping you in case anyone calls.
Yeah, sure. Happy to help if you have questions. Anybody have questions or thoughts, comments? I wonder who else are using WebBridge?
We use WebBridge
Uh-huh.
at Hillsdale.
What's your experience so far?
I don't deal a whole lot with it, but it seems, as you were saying, that when we do have a problem, it's a fairly easy, quick fix in-house. We don't have to monkey around with multiple emails to the vendors. So it seems to work well for us.
Mm-hmm. That's good. It's good to know.
And you switched because you switched
To Summon.
The Summon, okay.
Yeah. It's just like, because if we stay with WebBridge, then we have to upload our, actually, I don't know. If we stay with WebBridge. All right. I think it doesn't, we still have to upload our holding information to the WebBridge monthly. While if we switch to 360, we don't have to do that. So there's a particular thing that we can do. We can stop doing when we switch to 360, because you just rely on our resolution tracking, and then don't have to manually upload that information every week, every month, or whatever.
Are there other questions at this point or comments?
Or any of you not using link resolver at all? I'm curious. Okay.
I guess everybody's either using WebBridge or 360 link.
Or Alma.
No?
Oh,
Or Alma, yeah.
SFX, right? Alma, yeah. SFX. Mm-hmm.
If you want to talk a little bit about the other side in terms of usage statistics, because we've had a bunch of statistics, but we're trying to figure out how to collate them. And that was another thing I've heard from the other person who managed the link resolver, that SFX had a lot better usage statistics in terms of granularity.
Yes, I think stats is a WebBridge. While they provide stats, they actually very bare bone, and 360 when they provide stats, I think they're okay, but I do get the impression SFX is a better stats information. I see from Mary Beaker, I think they use EDS, so Full Text Finder. How do you like it, if you don't mind sharing, Mary? Okay. So it's difficult for them because they're small community college. Are you the one who's have to maintain it, or? Okay, it's hard to manage all of the work. I'm sorry. So how long you've been with EDS? Wow, 6 years. Is it EBSCO quite responsive on kind of troubleshooting support that you ask them? I see. Yeah. Mhm. It is. Uh, maybe because I don't know about what's your problem and what's theirs. I can relate to that because sometimes also my first thing is typically my first thing is checking is there something in our end first, and then well doesn't seem like our end, and then I have to check our central IT. Do you see anything different or odds in how people access this? And then they said not no, or maybe they say yes. Typically no. Then I have to contact Resolution. People cannot click this. When people click this is not working. What's going on? And then Resolutions, whichever solution they have to work on, either they readjust the metadata or they because sometimes they said, well, the metadata is different, then they have to escalate that to the metadata team because they have to investigate, or they can say, well, yeah, this is simply fixed. We work on it, and then it will available for the next update. Or they can say, this is not our problem. You got to talk to the vendors. And then typically, sometimes vendors also say, well, your thing, your service provider have to adjust their linking because we don't want to adjust our own linking just to fulfill what they need, and then go back again to Service Solution. Well, they said you cannot fix that, and Service Solution said, well, I don't know, and then they kind of like with hand, and then after 2 years, it's still an open case. This one particular problem, and then don't know. I that's the one question. Like, why don't they just talk to each other?
Well, I did
Yeah.
see on the Ex Libris listserv with them buying Innovative that someone was speculating what would happen to the Sky River data, because like a week before that someone posted up like, is there a way for OCLC subscribers to get like specific collections added, you know, in the knowledge base? That way we have good metadata, you know, instead of having to keep constantly funneling records from connection into, you know, Ex Libris's knowledge base, at least for the metadata side.
Well, if I understand how they work, it probably takes them 5 years to finally figure out what needs to be done. Based on
That's
my
about
based on my experience between ProQuest and Ex Libris.
Oh, I was just going to say it feels that way, because I think that's about as long as I've been arguing for them to merge the two knowledge bases
Okay.
before. I'm like, please, please. It's so weird to have to go to two places and then try to figure out, okay, you got the metadata, but you don't have the holdings, or you have the holdings, but there's no metadata, so you can't find EBSCO anything.
Yeah, I can understand that though, because these are two completely different company with two completely different system design and everything else, and they have to make sure these two different systems talk to each other. So there's a lot of works going on. But then it feels like sometimes feel like the right hand doesn't know what the left hand are talking about, and then and I'm sure they work hard on trying to figure out how to achieve that. And things become so convoluted, it feels like they just have to scrap everything and start from the scratch. Seems like a better idea to me. So it's just me. So Mary asked is if she's wondering if for some small school like them is that discovery service a bit too much work to manage, and I don't know. I think it's also really depends what system you use. Um, I think it's the value is still good, but you're right. It's the timing. It's more like about the willingness of the library to put more resources to help you out in managing the access. So I think my parting thoughts is um, investigating a software access can be done much, oh yeah, self-hosted links require vigilant and effort to keep this updated, and it cannot rely on one person unit, or in your case, probably you don't do this full time. So it's more about how many resources, how much resource that the library is willing to invest.
Okay, are there any more questions or thoughts at this point? Anything else anybody wants to add? Okay, well, I would like to thank Ranti for sharing her knowledge of link resolvers, and I really appreciate her taking the time. And for the rest of you, I'm appreciative that you're here listening and came in to do this. I believe Ranti will be available for questions if you want to reach out after this, if you have other questions.
Yeah. And
Okay.
I show again this information, I think. Yeah, my email address, junus@msu.edu, and if you want to contact me via social media, I'm easily findable at Twitter. And then, and actually I would like, I'm going to share this linking back to you, but I also like to create a Google Docs that contain all the resources I use in preparing this, and you all can add more into that documentation, and I hope this has become our, like, I don't know, community documentation for this particular topic, if you want.
That would be great. And Deja has shared a link to an article on the state of link resolvers. So you should be able to pull that out of the chat.
That's cool.
Yeah.
Thank you, Deja.
Yeah, I still need to read it. It's in my 2 or 3 things I need to read for strategic planning, then AI and libraries. But I love the diagram on page 19 because it goes through publishers, subscription agents, link resolver suppliers, and then, yeah.
Yeah.
I finally have a diagram that makes sense. I needed this like 4 years ago, but.
Yeah, I was thinking about creating diagram for this, but then I'm looking at the other diagrams available out there and feel like, should I steal them? Should I create myself? I decided neither.
All right. Well, I hope everybody has a nice holiday, and we will get back together again in January, I believe. I don't have the date right here in front of me. Yes, I do. It's January 20th, and we are talking about accessibility.
Cool. Looking forward to that one.
Great time off work.